how was I involved with the founding of Genesis? I was involved from almost the very beginning.
Well, I was very active in Temple Beth Emeth, not at the foundation of the congregation, but very early on. And when we were a small congregation and every member mattered, everybody had to pitch in. So I first was involved with membership, and then I was vice president for pulpit, and then I became president of the congregation. And in that time, Genesis was formed.
Well, it was back in 1969, and I was the second president of the temple at the time. And our rabbi was Bruce Warshall, our very first rabbi. And he and your rector, Doug Emeth, of blessed memory, were friends. And we were looking for space. And so Bruce was talking to Doug about the possibility of renting space from your church, so that we could have our Friday night services there. Mm-hmm. And they agreed. At the same time, your warden, Bob Creel, a lawyer, an Ann Arbor lawyer, and I, also an Ann Arbor lawyer, were friends, colleagues, we knew each other. And so Bob asked me to work with him on the negotiation of the rental agreement between St. Clare's and the temple. And so that was how I became involved. We rented for 5 years, and then at that point, the temple and St. Clare's began discussing the formation of Genesis.
St. Clare's was about 200 people. The temple had originally been about 60 people when it came, but it was getting to be toward the same size and on their way up, clearly on their way up. And so they had started talking about that they would need a larger building. And so they would be moving out. And both of them were rather, sad, because this had really been a good thing to the relationship. And one of those meetings, the idea sort of landed, and nobody can agree on whose idea it was, which is pretty funny. Bruce thinks it was Doug's idea. Doug says it was half of his idea. Bob thinks it was Bruce's idea. So, I don't know. I'd say it was the Holy Spirit moving in.
And he asked me to come into his office, and we discussed what I later discovered was some discussion by the temple leadership concerning their desire either to move or to stay. And Doug asked me what I thought about it, and under the circumstances at the time, it sounded like a good idea to me. We took it to our vestry and decided that it sounded like a good idea possibly with a vestry, but it was not a decision for the vestry to make. It was a decision for the congregation to make.
When it was ready, when it was time to have the vote as to whether we would, there were only 8 people in the congregation who voted against it. And so I think that was quite a demonstration, but that we were, and the same thing happened in the temple. It was really overwhelmingly welcomed.
It struck me when I was thinking about this 50th anniversary how so very nearly Genesis never happened. If the temple had been perfectly happy renting classroom space from a public school, if the church had had Daddy Warbucks, a financial support person to endow them so there was no financial worry at St. Clare's, if the building had looked more traditionally like a church and had stained glass windows, say, and said, I'm a church and I'm only a church, if the clergy had not become friends, and if we hadn't been birthed in Ann Arbor, I'm not sure Genesis would have ever happened. But it did happen because it was a good arrangement financially, but that was the least of it. There was a commitment from both congregations to form a partnership to show the world, really, that two different faiths could use a single space and make it work. Part of making this space a Jewish congregation was to put a mezuzah on the outside of the door. And we had the big weekend of celebration of Genesis. We had Friday night services and Sunday morning services, which both congregations attended. But on Saturday, we had a party together. And we all came outdoors to see our congregant nail the mezuzah on the outside of the door. And to our astonishment, at that moment there was a clap of thunder. And we all looked at one another and said, is this a ratification or is this a warning? But it was an extraordinary moment. And so that's one of my memories of the thunder in the sky when we put the mezuzah up.
What was difficult was not the founding, the relationships, the desire, the energy between both congregations helped us get through it all. What became more challenging later on was as we grew. We needed more space, there were more things going on, and so we had to work together to deal with the conflicts, which we're able to do with good leadership and a continuing recognition that we have to work together. We were able to do it, and the place served us well.
It's amazing that we worried very much about making the transition and making sure that when the building was a church, it was only a church, and when it was a temple, and the bulletin boards across the class, how we ingeniously made it so that you slid over and you covered up the Jewish children's work and only the St. Clarians kids' work was showing. We were so proud of solving these little problems. And over time, it just became a matter-of-fact thing. If it's showing, it's showing. If it's not, I think it doesn't distress anybody. Everybody simply takes it for granted that we're neighbors together.
What does it mean to me now?
I wrote on the occasion of the 25th anniversary in the brochure that was prepared, and really very nice, the story of Genesis of Ann Arbor. At that time, I was asked for a quotation, and then I wrote, "Those few of us from both congregations who were there that day," that's the day that the star went up next to the cross, "recognized that not only were we making history, but more significantly that we were making a sacred commitment. I personally had a sense of pride and accomplishment not unlike what I felt when my children were born." And that's still the case. I think I would put on my tombstone, founding partner of Genesis.
My feeling today is being one of extreme pride. I'm very proud of Genesis being what it is today.
I always felt that it was an honor to be called upon to help committees running Genesis, even today, to talk about how it all happened. So I'm grateful to be a part of this anniversary celebration. But added to that is a recognition of the times in which we live, where anti-Semitic incidents are more frequent than ever. You see this every day when we walk into this building for services at night, or the added police presence at temples and synagogues all over the country. So to be a Jewish congregation, not just sharing this building, but having a substantive, caring relationship with St. Clare's is particularly meaningful to us now and critically important to us.
But the thing that I'm aware of now is we're in the hard part. We're in the hard part because we've been together long enough so that we've hurt each other some, and that's left some scars. And we've got to rebuild that trust, and it's we have to keep at it. I mean, we were not as aware as we could have been with what the consequences. We were looking into ourselves. We were preoccupied there. That's where you go wrong. That's where you go wrong. But I'm hopeful we're going to make it through this. It's just another stage of, here we are on this human journey, and we're fallible humans, and we hopefully can forgive one another and reform ourselves and move on.
Well, as leadership changes and members come and go, it's become increasingly apparent that we need to proactively join together to do more together, to restore that sense of community that we once had, to celebrate more often our shared values and events, to care about each other as friends, despite or maybe even because of, our religious differences. This is what I hope will happen.
100-year anniversary, that would be wonderful, even though I will be long gone. But maybe I've left behind at least some documentation as to what it was to begin with, and for most of the people in both congregations who weren't here worshiping either faith 50 years ago.
Sweet harmony, 'cause each time I feel it slipping away, it just makes me wanna cry. So what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding?